Getting ready to buy or sell a home in 30, 60, or 90 days? Then check out BundleSelect.com to find out how you could save 20% or more on your entire transaction. Save on real estate, lending, and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. Bundle Select's hand-picked team of experts will compete for your business, so you'll save thousands of dollars by bundling all of these services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. By bundling services like real estate, lending, and title, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. Act now, and this new model could save you money on your move, lower your interest rate, or cover your closing costs. Visit BundleSelect.com. That's BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004666902.
Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Kuchera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome in, Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are following us live, streaming on Facebook. We appreciate that. We'll continue to provide more and more opportunities for you to view the show, listen to the show. Mainly, we want you to download the podcast, obviously, because you can listen to the show at your convenience when you can at any time. So a couple different ways you can get the podcast. You go to iTunes. Just type in Real Estate Radio Live. You can download the podcast there. You can go to our website, which is RERL-1523.com. Google, Stitcher, any of those places, just type in Real Estate Radio Live, download the podcast. For almost 8 years now, the focus is education and information. That's what we do on this show. We try to provide the best value-based information to the consumer so that the consumer then can turn around and make educated, wise financial decisions in and around real estate. So we try to do a diverse job at really getting diverse topics in here. As we do today, we're going to have the legal topics of real estate perspective, buying, selling, financing, building, all kinds of different topics we'll try to cover. For more information during the week, if you want to reach me, 408-838-9060, or you could always email joe at reradiolive.com. All right, let me get started here. Our guest in the studio today is Mr. Dean Rossi, and he is Dean Rossi, attorney at law. Dean, good to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Always good to have Dean here. It's great to have the legal expertise every once in a while. He's kind enough to spend some time with us. Today we're going to review a couple different things, actually. One of the things we're going to spend some time on, probably a fair amount of time in the first segment, is just this Bay Area market, which I'm sure there's other markets like this, but it's unique. We all live here. We work here. In Dean's case, he sees this a lot. I see it a lot, financing. And that is the idea of these non-contingent offers. What are you really getting into? Is your deposit in jeopardy? And if it is, you know, what kind of issues do you have? What kind of legal ramifications are there? There's a lot to this. And we were talking right before we came on the show here how it's amazing, Dean, you brought this up a lot, and you're so right, how people are so quick to make these decisions on something so expensive.
Right.
And they just don't understand. Is it because it's so darn emotional and everything's moving so quick? What's the...
Well, let's start. What is a non-contingent offer?
Yeah,
and you're talking about someone buying a piece of property. What's the average home?
$1.2 million.
$1.2 million,
area, yeah.
Which is probably the largest in the nation, or one of the largest in the nation. And you're making an offer without having a loan contingency, without having the ability for the lender to approve it. The same with a financing contingency or a appraisal contingency.
Right.
What if it doesn't appraise? And also, most importantly, a property inspection contingency where you get so many days, say 5, 10, 15, 20 days to take a look at the property and see if you want it or not. So people are making these offers with zero contingencies to make it more attractive because that's what the market is bearing right now.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just traveling and I was talking to some people from Alabama. They were in the mortgage business, and someone from St. Louis. And we started talking about non-contingent offers, and they looked at me like I was crazy. People are
you
doing,
said California, and
people,
that's all I need to know.
Yeah, right. But people are doing what? They're non-contingent offers, and they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So it causes so many potential problems. And listen, I understand as a buyer, I understand you want to make your offer very attractive, and you want to get that piece of property, and there's multiple bidders, but there's a lot of risk associated with making a non-contingent offer.
Yeah, there is. So on the consumer, we'll talk a little bit on both sides. Really, so from the consumer perspective, we have someone that's listening, obviously viewing the podcast, and then later on they're going to listen, download the podcast. For those listening as well, if you're a consumer out there, it's really important. Maybe when we're talking about non-contingencies, you don't know what we're talking about, so we'll give you a review of that too. But that's when you're getting ready to prepare to make an offer on a property. For those consumers that have been through this, you know this, real estate agents, you know it as well. What are some of the things that I guess if we start from the ground floor and kind of the foundational conversation here, Dean, right away, someone's getting ready to buy a home. They've engaged with the real estate agent. They have a relationship. They're getting ready to put in an offer. What would be some of the things you would just say from a legal perspective that you see this all the time? These are the 2 or 3 or 4 things that I would make sure I understood with a relationship with my realtor and that contract.
Well, I think the first thing the real estate agent should be doing is sitting down with the client and talking about the ramifications of making a non-contingent offer and discussing those risks, possibly talking to an attorney to see what those risks are, depending upon the type of offer, depending upon the situation you're in. I have clients come in the door who have made multiple offers and lost on properties, so they're making their offer more attractive. So they're making it non-contingent. They're going above the asking price. Now, here in this valley, I think you find a lot of people making offers and it goes for higher than the asking price. That obviously raises a problem because then there's a risk that if it goes higher than the value, it won't appraise.
Right.
And then if you do that, you're talking about what does the contract say. And the contract here in California, most of our form contracts have the option, it's an option to include what's called the liquidated damage provision, which is a provision in the contract that says if the buyer breaches, if the buyer does not go forward, the seller's only remedy is to keep the deposit up to 3% of the deposit. And obviously most people put in 3% or about 3%, and then that deposit could be at risk. And so the first thing I think is you need to have that discussion with someone, your real estate agent or a lawyer, as to what do I do in this situation? What are the risks? If your agent's not sitting down with you, and a lot of brokerages have forms that you read, but I like those agents who are going to spend the time with their clients saying, look, we talked about buying a car. When you buy a car, you go for a test drive. Yeah. When you go buy a car, you're looking at the specs. You're looking at the tires. You're looking under the engine. Right. If you're making a non-contingent offer, you're spending, how many times more than a car? A lot more times than a car, and you're purchasing something without that look, without that test drive.
So that brings up a good point. DocuSign's wonderful. It's great. Moves documents around, paper around, allows people to do these signatures in different locations. But as you mentioned this, I'm thinking, so are you saying that if someone, if you're a new buyer and a real estate agent fires off and says just DocuSign everything, should you sit down? Should you say, hey, I really want to sit down and understand some of this?
Well, the issue is whether that on the real estate agent side, is that a breach of your fiduciary duty to your client to sit down. Agents have fiduciary duty to sit down and explain the consequences of the transaction, explain what's going on. In the olden days, I loved to see those stickers that said sign here because it was telling me that the agent's not sitting down with the client and reviewing it with them. DocuSign sort of the same thing. Yeah. You're not having that conversation. A lot of times real estate agents will now give the contract in advance. They'll sit down with them for hours and go over it. Sometimes it's DocuSign later on. Right. But it's really important, I think, as a real estate agent. It's a contract. You're signing a legal contract. It's pre-printed. If you take the contract, I think it's like 4-point font. Yeah. It's single spaced. It's tiny. If you double spaced it and you made it 12-point font, I think it's going to be about a 35-page contract. Yeah. So the point is I think any really good real estate agent, I think it falls below the standard of care not to sit down with the client and to review it. On the client side, I want to have a real estate agent who's going to answer my questions, who's going to sit down with me and explain to me what this means. What does it mean? Right. If, for example, I make a non-contingent offer with no appraisal contingency and it doesn't appraise.
Right.
What's going to happen? What could happen to my deposit?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that from a legal perspective, but I call this the conference room or the kitchen table discussion when you're sitting down with your client talking about the consequences. That's the first thing that should happen is that review.
Right. If I'm a real estate agent, I mean, knowing what I know now, or even if I'm trained or educated in a certain way, in a market that's like this, it's very competitive and tensions are high and stress is all over the place for no reasons that we control, but they are. What would be the harm? I mean, we've said this before, recommended coming to see someone like yourself and sitting down for an hour and doing a consultation. I mean, to me, we buy insurance every day on homeowners, our cars, our umbrella. I mean, again, you're getting ready to buy, let's say, a $1.5 million home. I mean, almost a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you sit down with someone like yourself, spend an hour or so, and just make your mind at ease, I would think. Talk a little bit about that.
I was always amazed. I mean, let's just take, for example, a type of inspection.
Yeah.
Let's just say there's a pool in the property, and you get asked the question, do you want to have a pool inspection?
Yeah.
Why would you spend $1.2 million on a house that has a pool and not spend the $500 for a pool inspection? Right?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense to me. No, we are lucky in this valley. We have some fantastic real estate agents.
We do.
We really, really do. So most real estate agents are going to sit down and review this with you.
Right.
But real estate agents, they do know I can't give you legal advice. A real estate agent, master of all, or master of some, but not master of all. You have to know you have to do a little bit of everything to say, wait a minute, you know what? I need to get a roof inspector to really tell you what's wrong with this roof. The seller disclosed X. Maybe we want to talk to someone, or maybe we need a lawyer. So typically, your real estate agent will say, "Listen, I can't give you legal advice. Go talk to a lawyer."
No, that's a very good point. So let's talk a little bit about you mentioned that. In general, the contract really puts the deposit in jeopardy for your buyer. Sign a contract, and again, 3%, just do the easy math. It could be $1 million home, $30,000 could be in jeopardy. I mean, is it that cut and dry? If you put in a non-contingent offer, kind of go over some ways that a person could legitimately lose that deposit.
Sure. So the first thing you look at is the contract. What does the contract say?
Okay.
And you look at that paragraph on liquidated damages, and it says, essentially, liquidated damages are a provision that allow the buyer, if the buyer breaches, allows the seller to take the deposit as a damage. And it's because in these situations, determining the seller's damages are difficult to determine. That's what a liquidated damage is. It's a predetermination of the damages because it's hard to determine what actual damage would be if a buyer breaches.
Right.
So the first thing I look at is this provision checked, initialed by both the buyer and the seller? If it is, then we know if the buyer breaches, the seller has the ability to take the buyer's deposit as their damage. So what does the code say? What the code says is to determine whether or not that provision is valid, liquidated damage is valid, you look at the time of the contract, you look at all the circumstances, including, and this is a little odd, whether the deposit was reasonable at the time the contract was made. One of the things you look at is a subsequent sale. So what happens in the next 6 months?
I see.
So the question would become, for example, if using your hypothetical, if the contract's for $100,000 and the deposit's $30,000 and the house doesn't appraise, and the buyer says, I can't buy. So the first thing the seller's going to do is try to mitigate their damages and try to remarket the property and sell it. Let's say it sells for $5,000 more money within a month.
Yeah.
Is that reasonable? Is the liquidated damage provision of $30,000 when the seller actually made more money in a subsequent sale, is that reasonable? Well, you'd think there'd be a straight answer, but there's really not.
Yeah.
Determining what's reasonable looks at all the factors. So if, for example, the only out-of-pocket damages the seller suffered was, I lost a mortgage payment.
Yeah.
I lost $3,000 of a mortgage payment. The arguments can be made by the buyer. Look, you don't have liquidated damages. You don't get my full $30,000 deposit. You get your actual damages, which are $3,000. Right. That provision is unreasonable.
I see.
I had a case recently. Take this, for example. Very similar situation. Assume it's $1 million and the deposit is $30,000 and it sells for $5,000 more.
Yeah.
The buyer came back and said, you sold it for 1 month. Give me the full deposit. Give me the full thing. You lost 1 month's rent. Wait a minute. My client was in a 1031 exchange.
Yeah.
She was trying to buy property, and because of the delay, the couple months, we lost the opportunity to purchase property. The market changed out of state, and she couldn't buy property she wanted, so she had to fly back out to the state or various states and incur all of those costs. So there's sort of a balancing of
that's a good
all
point.
the things that the seller had to incur. Wait a minute, it's not just that. I had to take time off work.
Yeah.
You knew I was in a 1031 exchange.
Right.
It was disclosed to you. You knew this was a potential. You knew I was trying to find property because of the delay.
Right.
So then you're kind of arguing whether or not it's reasonable, and the law is never that cut and dry,
Right.
and you wish there was a bright line rule, but there's not. We're arguing, is this reasonable?
Right.
Are you close enough to the deposit to show? Now, let's just take another example. What if interest rates increased in that month?
Yeah.
Because rates are going up.
Yep.
Wait a minute, now I was at one rate when I was in contract,
Right.
and now, because of the delay, the property I had to buy, I wanted to buy, I have an increased interest rate. And you prove that. Over the life of 30 years, the damages could be much higher. So you're kind of balancing that.
Yeah.
So there's no bright line test. A lot of people think, I've heard a lot of clients who will come to me and they'll say, my agent told me I get the deposit, the buyer breach. It's automatic. Give it to me.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, not so fast. Not so fast.
Right.
So.
No, that makes sense. And so it's not cut and dry. It's there for a reason, to protect all parties, really. However, if it really comes down to what you're saying, and you've articulated very well, is that, you have to look at each case differently.
Every case is different.
Every case is different.
Every case is different.
Yeah, you can't just, as you mentioned, you can't just assume, out of contract, I'll take your deposit.
Right.
Just not that easy.
And a lot of people think that.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think it's mandatory in our pre-printed, both the California Association of Realtor form and the PRDS form has a mediation provision.
Okay.
Whether the arbitration provision is checked, we're going to mediation first.
Right.
And in these deposit disputes, it really is a great thing to be forced to sit down and try to mediate and settle it, because at the end, for $30,000, what happens if it doesn't get settled is everyone is paying their attorneys a lot of money, and the attorney's fees oftentimes will be greater, if not twice as much or 3 times as much as the deposit. Good
point. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. Dean, before we do that, for those that are interested in your services, want to contact you, it's Dean Rossi, attorney at law. Is there a phone number or email?
Call my email address at dean@rdlaw.net.
Okay, very good. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Again, this for those that are watching us on Facebook, stick with us. This is one quick minute break for our podcast. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, sitting alongside Dean Rossi. We're talking about some legal advice in terms of real estate. We'll be back with you in a minute to continue the show. Thanks.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Getting ready to buy or sell a home in 30, 60, or 90 days? Then check out BundleSelect.com to find out how you could save 20% or more on your entire transaction. Save on real estate, lending, and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. Bundle Select's hand-picked team of experts will compete for your business, so you'll save thousands of dollars by bundling all of these services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. By bundling services like real estate, lending, and title, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. Act now, and this new model could save you money on your move, lower your interest rate, or cover your closing costs. Visit BundleSelect.com. That's BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004666902.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Welcome back in. Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Taking a quick break and jumping back into our podcast. Today in studio we have Dean Rossi, who is kind enough to spend some time with us. I'd like to have him stop by if he can, depending on our schedule, every month or so, just to get us updated. He's attorney at law. We're talking about real estate, some legal issues in and around real estate. The first segment we covered, a lot about the non-contingent offer, the contract, what to be aware of, your deposit, is it in jeopardy, is it not? There's so many different variables. I'll just say this before we switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about disclosures, is that my recommendation would be, I've been doing this a long time. I've been in this market a long time. I've been on radio and podcasts a long time. I share this with you all the time. Have a team of people you trust, no matter what you're doing in this business. And someone like Dean, I would say it's a no-brainer. You're getting ready to make an offer or something that just doesn't feel right with your real estate transaction. It's smart to sit down and get legal advice. Yes, real estate agents are some wonderful real estate agents that have been doing this a long time, and they're really good, and they'll represent you better than anybody, but they're not attorneys. And if you're unsure about something, you just got that pit in your stomach, you're like, I'm not sure if I feel right about this. Go with that gut, right?
Right,
Get some advice.
We talked off air, but it's like also setting up expectations.
Yeah.
If you really understand what could potentially happen, I think you're more prepared. Take the example of if it doesn't appraise, it didn't appraise, I need to put more money in to make it close, as opposed to, I never knew that, and I could lose my deposit if that's the case. So it's setting up those expectations. One thing we didn't talk about also was, what do you do on the seller side of the transaction?
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah.
And I think as a seller, one thing you want to be careful of is you have a contract and the deposit will be, let's just say it's again $1 million. It's a $30,000 deposit. Let's say it goes for 1.1. You want to make sure that your real estate agent sets an increased deposit to get that to 3% because you want that 3% if the buyer breaches. So there is the way, there's a form on the car form to increase that deposit to get to 3% to make sure you're not below it, because you can have up to 3%.
Speaking of that, maybe you just kind of mentioned, but that just came to mind too. What about the situation when, let's say someone puts the 3% down, Dean, and then everything's going fine. All of a sudden they run into some snags. Well, we need a little more time on our financing. We're not quite sure about this. And then sometimes the seller agent will come back and they'll talk to their sellers and say, well, good faith, I'll tell you what, increase the deposit then. Give us another.
Well, you can increase the deposit, but it's not going to increase the liquidated damages.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It cannot exceed 3%.
Okay.
So
good point.
In those situations, though, the contracts generally have a provision. For example, the car form has a notice to perform.
Okay.
So, for example, if there's a delay, let's just say the buyer is having some problems with their lender. Sometimes and they have to remove contingencies or they have to close escrow. They'll do what's demand to close escrow and give them 2 or 3 days or notice to perform to give the buyer, hey, listen. And then after that expires, then the seller can cancel. You have to let that time expire. So it sort of keeps you in contract a little bit. So if the buyer, for example, there's a small delay with escrow and they need an extra day, and the seller will send that demand to close escrow, the DCE form, and it gives them 2 days to close escrow. They just can't cancel right away.
Right.
They have to wait those 2 days, and then they can have a valid reason to cancel. But you got to wait those 2 days.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about disclosures. Kind of cover those, what consumers should know about it, to bring up with the real estate agents. What's kind of an over in general?
Well, look, in these non-contingent situations, there's no question that the disclosures are looked at with much more scrutiny, because those are the only things that you're really looking at.
True.
Let's just say, for example, you don't have an inspection report and you're just relying upon the disclosures. You're really, really reading those things and making sure that they're accurate. You want to go look. I've had people bring their contractor in on a walkthrough to say, here's the seller's disclosures. Let's make sure was this repaired properly? What does this mean? It poses a problem if they're not disclosed. I mean, and people think, for example, because it's an as-is sale, it's an as-is transaction, well, I don't have to tell you everything. That's not true.
Right.
It's as-is means as disclosed. And in these non-contingent offers, as a buyer, the buyer and the buyer's agent are really going to be reviewing what they say. And I see a lot of transactions where either boxes aren't checked, yes or no, or they're checked yes. Are you aware of any foundation cracks? It's checked yes, and then there's no explanation. You're supposed to explain. And it poses problems for both the buyer and the seller. And it also poses problems for the real estate agent, because the real estate agent has the obligation to review those disclosures. You're going to talk to your client about the disclosures, what they mean. If an agent represents the seller, you're going to talk about the condition and ask the client. You're going to inquiry. It says inquiry the seller about the condition of the property, the who, what, when, where, why. and follow up. You just can't read
Right.
these things in a vacuum. For example, if you get a home inspection report and it shows there was a roof leak, the seller disclosed a roof leak, or let's say doesn't disclose anything, but there's a roof leak in the inspection report. You want to kind of don't read them in a vacuum. You got to read them together. You got to play detective a little bit, because especially when you're buying something non-contingent, these are the documents you're looking at.
Let me make sure I understand that right. When someone, you hear this a lot, someone just says it's as is. So they write a contract. You're buying the house. Nothing, as far as we're concerned, it's as is. So does that truly release the sellers from all the liabilities?
If the seller knows
of something,
if the seller knows of something,
okay,
the as is does not help you.
Okay, I see.
You have to disclose. What it means is if the seller's not making any representations or warranties as to a condition, you're not representing, for example, it's going to be watertight. But if you know of a roof leak, if you know of a problem, you have to fill up the forms accurately. There's no substitute for that.
Have you seen those things come up before where someone says as is and then later on you find out? Is that a dumb question?
Yeah. Like my father told me, it got me through law school.
So thank goodness on Dean's perspective for that.
Yeah, so I mean, you obviously have the obligation to disclose what you know. And then when it's a non-contingent offer, you're really going to be looking at those. I can't tell you how many times I don't even know if it's legal, but I'm arguing about, you didn't review this, the box is not checked yes or no. Doesn't that raise a red flag?
Yeah.
It raises a red flag. Or adjectives. I've had cases, for example, minor landslide repair. I don't know what a minor landslide repair is, and the agent didn't follow up and say, where are the documents? I don't know what an occasional roof leak is, or small puddling. I stay away from small and minor. If I was representing the seller, I would say just the facts, ma'am. There is a roof leak. Don't qualify it. And if I am the buyer and I read roof leak, it's going to raise a red flag. And you have to think about it. Do you have these disclosures, obviously, before you make your offer? Do you go take a look? Where was the roof leak? How long was it? How was it repaired? Who repaired it? How much was the repair? You want to ask those questions. If you buy a car, how fast does it go? How are the brakes? What does it get miles per gallon? What are the safety ratings? These are all the questions you ask for a car. Why wouldn't you ask the same thing for a house? So you need to read these disclosures critically. And I'm always amazed where sellers kind of skirt the truth. They'll talk about, listen, there's a blue-bellied lizard on the property, but they're not talking about the landslide. You know what I'm saying? So it gives buyers a sense, oh, they're disclosing there's lizards on the property, but not the landslide. So you see these quite a bit. I'd say a lot of the cases that come in the door is where the buyer believes the seller didn't disclose something, and they're upset.
Very good. You know, one of the things I thought of, I want to ask you about, again, consumers, awareness, education, information, that's what we do here. What is your perspective on the real estate side? So this is a consumer choosing real estate agents, who to work with. Some have had great relationships for years. So in that case, that's fine. Some are just starting out for the first time, trying to figure out who they want to work with. Is there a pattern or a trend in who do you see on the real estate side when your assessment that are more educated? Does it have something to do, Dean, with the firm they're with, or does it just come right down to the individual realtor because they're independent contracts?
It's funny. A lot of times I'll get the client who comes in and say, well, how do you know your real estate agent? Oh, he was a referral from my best friend John, and John said he was great. Did you interview anybody else? No. It always amazes me. I always talk to my clients who come in. Who else have you talked to? Go talk to somebody else. You don't like me?
Again, getting ready to make a huge decision, right?
Go talk to somebody else. So it amazes me because I don't think all real estate agents are created equal. I don't think
all of us, right?
Right, we're all different people, you know. So I always give someone, if someone ever asks me for a real estate agent, I give them 3 names. Go interview 3 people. Go to who works best with you. Who do you relate to the best? You know, obviously websites can be deceiving, but you read the websites, you look at the testimonials, you look at those things, how many transactions. Now, listen, there are some real estate agents who are fantastic at selling. There are some who are better at the contract. There are some who are good at both.
Makes sense.
There are agents who specialize in certain areas. If you're going to buy in the hills, I don't want my cousin Joey, who works in Fremont, who's not going to help me with the Santa Cruz Mountains. They don't know the Santa Cruz Mountain issues. So I want someone who's going to know school district issues, for example. If you're buying in Los Gatos or Willow Glen, where the school district and where the lines are all things that for resale that a educated buyer wants to know. So I don't think there's a bright line rule. You know, there's an old saying, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. I think you want to sit down with that person and have a conversation, see how they relate to you.
Yeah.
See how, are they asking you questions? Are they answering your questions? What does this mean? How does this work? Anyone who can answer those questions with some confidence and you feel like they're doing it the right way, and then interview 3 people. Yeah.
Do most larger, I guess, real estate firms, they retain or they have attorneys that basically work for them, right? A lot of the larger firms?
Some firms have people who are actually in-house counsel who are paid. Some people have people who are just dedicated to that particular firm who can answer questions, and that's always a good thing to have. I also have clients who retain me, and they say, listen, I'm going to pay for you to come talk to Dean Rossi.
Okay.
And I'll pay an hour of his time. Sit down with him. Yeah. And most clients go, whoa, my agent's paying for me to talk to a lawyer, and they're paying for it. It's a, you know,
smart investment.
It's a smart investment. And the same thing you talked about a team.
Right.
I think having a team is good because you want the best property inspector. You want a property inspector who has insurance. You want someone who knows what they're doing, who's reputable. I don't have to say it's the biggest company or the smallest company, but you want someone who's going to give you the information.
Right.
All of those things are the best lender, whatever it is. You want a team.
Yeah. I'm always interested different industries. I always like to ask guests, technology, innovation, how's it changing our industry? Technology and evolution is changing all the time. I tell people, you either understand it, endorse it, move along, and try to adapt because it is, or we can't stop it. But I guess the point in this situation, do you see anything down the road with technology that could be a challenge, more problematic, or is it going to make life easier? I guess in this transaction world.
We talked about DocuSign.
Okay.
I think there are definitely pluses to having DocuSign. There's definitely minuses. There is no substitute for a real estate agent or for a client to be sitting down together
to really have
having
that
the
knowledge,
conversation.
Yeah.
How many times have I heard different conversations at the kitchen table? I can tell you, I don't know who to believe, but one time I'll hear a buyer say the agent never talked about the septic system and how it was dilapidated, and I'll have the agent say, oh yeah, we sat down, we talked about it. And oftentimes I think, well, who do you believe?
Right.
I know some buyers, me included, you're not thinking about septic. You're thinking about where the big screen TV is going to go and what room is Garrett's room going to be, and you're not thinking about septic system.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes in here at the other. I think those good agents sit down, they review it, they make sure they're listening, and have that discussion. I had one client, we were in a lawsuit, and he sat down just to go over the listing agreement as long as it took 4.5 hours. Just to go over the listing agreement. And then 3 hours to go over the offers that came in and make sure the client understood them. It still ended in litigation, but that's what it takes sometimes.
Yeah. We got a couple of minutes left, but how important is, since we're on this line of this conversation topic, documentation, obviously very important. So you have the contract, but then speak to a little bit how important it is for a consumer, if they have questions, to do that via either email, and now there's a lot of text, right?
Right.
Because do you ever have to go back to that, Dean? Like, what emails went back and forth or text? How does that come into play?
Right. So the first thing I do as a lawyer, I ask for, give me all of your texts and all of your emails. Now it's easier to take a photograph of a text. There's also programs that will transcribe people's texts. That's easier. I do find texting limiting. I find email, for example, people can be more informal.
Good point. Yeah.
And I don't want people to be to have brevity like you do in a text.
Right.
I don't want things abbreviated. I want more explanation. So I don't recommend, when I talk to my real estate agent clients, doing everything via text, because you may not be really explaining the things that need to be explained because you're doing it really quick.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I find that a lot. I think in general people would agree that anytime you leave yourself to chance and you do more with text, I tell people be very careful when it's a business transaction. You're going back and forth with text.
Funny, I was sending an email today from my handheld, and my footer says, I apologize for being brief, and I'll get back to you later, or for typos, because I'm not going to be as long trying to on the little keyboard as I might when I'm sitting down really drafting a letter or drafting a formal email. So I think technology there has pros and cons, just like DocuSign does. You just need to be aware of the issues. I think the internet in general, you have a lot of people just looking online, and people can do great things with photographs, and you're really not looking at the property. So I think there's no substitute for going out there and looking at it, and seeing it and reading the disclosures. What does it say? And walking out there. So I don't think that could change. I don't think people, I trust people today aren't just relying upon a photograph and going and buying a piece of property.
Right.
But there's no substitute for going out there and feeling it and touching it and walking it.
Very good. All right, Dean, thanks for your time again. Again, before we duck out, one more time, people want to reach you. What's the best place to do that?
Dean at rdlaw.net.
Okay. And by the way, Dean is on our website permanently, so if you just go to RERadiolive.com, you go under legal representation. We have a network of team of people that we list on our website, so he's on the website as well. All right, this is Joe Kuchera at Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for showing today or watching us on Facebook. Appreciate that. And later on, if you're listening to us via the podcast, we appreciate that as well. Dean, thanks again.
Thank you.
Good having you.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.